The quiet ache beneath the chaos, Lucy's roller skating impulse and the loneliness of motherhood. I have returned to these early scenes of the Lucy show more times than I can count, and every time the same soft persistent ache settles in my chest before the first real laugh even arrives. It is the ache of watching a woman try with all the bright flustered energy she can muster to close a distance that keeps widening between herself and the people she loves most. The script opens not with a bang or a pratfall but with something quieter and more revealing. Lucy Carmichael standing in her living room asking Vivian to shorten a dress, insisting that they're wearing them short this year while the real worry sits just beneath the surface like a stone in the shoe. She wants to look right for the country club dance. She wants to wow them. She wants in the particular way of middle-aged women who still feel the pull of being seen to matter in a room full of eligible bachelors, of which, as Vivian dryly notes, there are exactly two. But the moment that stays with me, the one that feels closest to the bone, is the telephone call about Jerry's Indian outing and the sudden almost panicked realization that she has forgotten it entirely. "I've been so excited about this dance," she says. "I've been neglecting my kids. I completely forgot about Jerry's Indian outing." The line is delivered with Lucille Ball's characteristic mix of comic exaggeration and genuine distress, and yet it lands harder than many of the broader gags that follow. I recognize that tone. I have heard versions of it in my own voice and in the voices of friends. And in the quiet admissions of mothers who love their children fiercely and still find themselves lost in the daily scramble of looking presentable, staying afloat, trying to keep some small ember of their own identity burning. The script does not linger long on the children's disappointment. It moves quickly into Lucy's decision to buy roller skates so she can spend time with Chris. But the speed itself feels truthful. Life rarely grants us the luxury of sitting with our failures as parents. We make a plan instead. We decide with sudden conviction that this next activity will bridge the gap. When Lucy declares that she is going downtown to Carlisle Sporting Goods to buy skates, the decision is framed as both practical and slightly ridiculous. Vivian reminds her that Mr. Bivian reminds her that Mr. Bivian reminds her that Mr. Bivian Mooney has threatened dire consequences if she buys another luxury item. Lucy insists the skates are a necessity if it's gonna bring me any closer to my daughter. The line is funny in its self-justification, and yet I cannot hear it without feeling the quiet desperation underneath. How many of us have dressed up ordinary longings as necessities? How many of us have told ourselves that the new dress, the new hobby, the new shared activity will finally make us the parent we keep meaning to be? The comedy of the scene rests on Lucy's inability to stay within any reasonable budget or any reasonable plan, but the emotional truth sits deeper. She is lonely inside her own motherhood. Chris is growing up. The girl who once put her fingers in her mouth now puts them in a telephone dial. The distance is not dramatic, it is ordinary and therefore harder to name. I think of my own childhood afternoons spent watching these episodes on grainy afternoon reruns. Sitting too close to the television, absorbing the particular music of Lucille Ball's voice without yet understanding what it was teaching me. As a child, I laughed at the physical business, the wide eyes, the perfectly timed collisions. As an adult, I hear the loneliness more clearly. Lucy is a widow raising two children with the help of her divorced friend Vivian, living in a suburban world that still expects women to maintain a certain surface of competence and charm. The country club dance is not merely a social event. It is one of the few remaining stages on which she can still perform a version of herself that feels desirable and alive. The forgotten Indian outing is the cost of that performance. The decision to buy roller skates is an attempt to balance the ledger. What strikes me most watching the scene unfold again is how little the script judges her. There is no moralizing speech about putting children first. There is only the gentle practical presence of Vivian, who has heard all of this before and still stays. Vivian's loyalty is one of the quiet miracles of the series. She does not fix Lucy, she does not lecture her into better behavior. She simply remains ready to shorten the dress, ready to go downtown, ready to watch Lucy try on skates 2 sizes too small. In a culture that often frames female friendship as secondary to romance or motherhood, the show treats this bond as the real infrastructure holding Lucy's chaotic life together. I have needed friends like that. Most of us have. The ones who do not require us to be better before they will stand beside us in the sporting goods store with curlers still in our hair. The roller skating impulse itself feels like a classic Lucy solution, oversized, physical, slightly unhinged, and rooted in a genuine emotional need. She has not skated in years. She knows it will not magically restore the closeness she feels slipping away. And yet she proceeds with the full force of her optimism, insisting that it'll all come back to me. That phrase echoes through so many of her schemes. It will all come back. The old competence, the old connection, the old version of herself that knew how to keep everything spinning. The tragedy and the comedy of Lucy Carmichael is that it never quite does, and she keeps believing anyway. I recognize that belief. I have carried versions of it through my own seasons of feeling inadequate to the people I love. The hope that the next effort will finally be enough. There is something particularly poignant about locating this ache inside a story that will soon explode into pure physical comedy. The swollen feet, the inability to remove the skates, the disastrous entrance at the country club, all of that is coming. But the script is wise enough to plant the quieter motivation first. Lucy is not simply a woman who cannot resist a bad idea. She is a mother who feels herself becoming peripheral in her daughter's life and reaches almost blindly for any activity that might pull them back into the same orbit. The fact that the activity involves roller skates, an object so perfectly designed for Lucille Ball's brand of kinetic disaster, is the show's particular genius. It takes a real human longing and builds a physical comedy engine around it. I think often about the cultural moment in which these episodes first aired. 1964. The early years of the single mother sitcom still carried a certain novelty and a certain anxiety. Lucy Carmichael is not the idealized suburban housewife of earlier television. She is messy financially, precarious, romantically, hopeful, and frequently overwhelmed. The show allows her to be all of those things without punishing her for them. Mr. Mooney exists as the voice of fiscal restraint and social respectability, but the audience is never asked to side with him against Lucy's heart. We are invited instead to root for the woman who keeps trying, even when the trying looks ridiculous. That invitation feels more radical the older I get. We live in a time that often demands women be simultaneously high-achieving and endlessly self-sacrificing, competent and self-effacing, present for their children and still somehow interesting in their own right. Lucy fails at almost all of it spectacularly, and the show loves her for the failure. When she tells Vivian that Chris is at such a critical age and that it seems like overnight the girl took her fingers out of her mouth and stuck them in a telephone dial, I feel the specific texture of parental time. Children do not grow gradually in our perception. They leap. One day they need us for everything. The next they have private worlds we can only glimpse. The roller skates are Lucy's attempt to step into one of those private worlds before the door closes further. That she chooses an activity she is spectacularly unsuited for only makes the gesture more human. We do not always reach for the things we are good at when we are trying to love people better. Sometimes we reach for the things that feel like they might create a shared story even if the story ends with us on the floor. I remember watching this episode years ago with my own mother, who laughed at the physical comedy and then grew quiet during the brief exchange about neglected children. She did not say anything, but I could feel the recognition in the room. Mothers carry private ledgers of the moments they missed, the outings they forgot, the ways they were present in body and absent in attention. The show does not offer easy absolution, but it does offer company. Lucy's panic is allowed to be both funny and real. Her solution is allowed to be both absurd and touching. In the space between those two truths, something honest about the experience of loving imperfectly is allowed to breathe. The decision to go downtown with curlers still in her hair feels in this light like more than a comic detail. It is the visual expression of a woman who is trying to hold too many versions of herself at once: the mother who wants to bond with her daughter, the woman who still hopes to be found attractive at the country club, the friend who needs Vivian's steadying presence, the client who must stay one step ahead of Mr. Mooney's disapproval. The curlers are the unfinished business of all those roles. She cannot even complete the simple act of making herself presentable before the next urgent need asserts itself. Life for Lucy is always arriving before she is ready. The comedy comes from watching her improvise. The ache comes from recognizing how often we do the same. As the scene moves toward the sporting goods store, I find myself lingering on the quiet motivation that set everything in motion. Lucy does not buy the skates because she loves skating. She buys them because she loves her daughter, and no longer knows the right language for that love. The physical disaster that follows is pure Lucy. The emotional premise is something closer to the bone. In the years since I first watched these episodes, I have become more tender toward that premise. I have more patience for people who reach for the wrong tool when they are trying to fix a real loneliness. I have more affection for the part of us that still believes the next shared activity might be enough to close the distance. Lucille Ball understood something essential about the relationship between chaos and care. Her characters are rarely still. They are always in motion, always hatching plans, always colliding with the furniture of ordinary life. But underneath the motion there is almost always a simple human wanting to be close to someone, to be admired, to be forgiven, to matter. The roller skating impulse is one of the purest expressions of that wanting in the entire series. It is impractical. It is doomed. It is in its way an act of love. And the show, to its lasting credit, never asks us to choose between laughing at the impracticality and honoring the love. It allows both to exist in the same frame, the same breath, the same perfectly timed fall. I return to these opening moments because they remind me that the greatest physical comedians are often the ones who understand the quietest human needs. Lucille Ball could take a fall like no one else, but she could also look at a growing child and let the fear of losing her register in the eyes before the next joke arrived. That combination, the broad and the intimate, the chaotic and the tender, is what keeps these episodes alive for me long after the specific gags have become familiar. Lucy wants to skate with her daughter, the wanting is real. Everything that follows, every swollen ankle and every country club collision, grows from that single ordinary heartbreaking desire to close the distance before it becomes permanent. In the end, the roller skates are not really about skating. They are about time and the way it moves faster than our best intentions. They are about the stories we invent to stay close to the people we love. They are about the particular courage it takes to look ridiculous in the service of connection. Lucy Carmichael has that courage in abundance. It is messy and expensive and frequently humiliating, and it is also in its imperfect way a form of grace. I watch her decide to buy the skates. And I feel the old ache rise again, not because the plan will fail, but because the longing that created it is so familiar, so enduring, and so deeply recognizably human.